Right. Well,
Just
fortunately, remember to unmute myself.
right.
So, so the title I've just come up with for this talk is actually Celebrating the Wonder of Sangha. That's what I'm going to be trying to say something about. And within that, I'm going to be celebrating the founding of the Triratna Sangha. So I thought it seems particularly poignant to be talking about Sangha when right now we are physically isolated from each other and possibly even suffering from a lack of simple human contact. So what I'm hoping from this evening is that we'll have a sense of knowing that the experience of Sangha is not limited by space or time. I hope you recognize, I hope you'll be able to feel that we are connected, if only through the communality of our experience of self-isolating, which is for the benefit of ourselves and for each other, for all life, in our society at least. So tonight, one of the things I thought I'd just start with is just say something about my own sense of this precious connection to Sangha. And the way that I am working with it for myself right now is actually recognizing through meditation that we are all Sangha, all people are participating in a single field of open awareness. So I hope in your own experience you can recognize that awareness isn't mine or your awareness, yet it's something we all participate in. And this awareness has no edge, no boundary, no shape, and is not dependent on time or location. And yet it is definitely something that's here. So when I'm in awareness, I am connected to you. We are connected to each other through this open field of awareness. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the founding of the Triratna Sangha, which was 53 years ago this month. And through that, I'm going to be celebrating the wonder of Sangha. So in the months leading up to April 1967, Sangharakshitas came to a vision that led him to create a new Buddhist movement. He recognized that his vision of how to communicate the Dharma in the West was going to need a new framework for sharing its radical nature in a way that hadn't been seen before. So although his vision appeared radical to some at the time, Sangharakshita understood for himself that it was simply a reiteration of the traditional teachings which he was unpicking from their cultural and historical settings. For some reason my screen has changed. I'm not sure what's happened there. So, sorry, I got a bit distracted by the screen changing then. So Sangharakshita created this new movement, which appeared to some to be very radical. But Sangharakshita was understood that it was simply a reiteration of the traditional teachings, which he was trying to unpick from their cultural and historical settings so that they could be seen and articulated more vividly for the conditions that he found himself in. So tonight, what I'm going to try and do is try to say something about Sangharakshita's vision. And I do this to celebrate him, but also to celebrate the power and the vitality of vision. I hope it's clear that we all need vision, a clear seeing into the deeper purpose of our own life. This vision is what orientates our choices. Without it, our path will tend to be unclear and washed around by external forces competing for our energy and attention. So our vision, or you might say a bit more poetically, what we know directly through our heart, can become our compass, the lodestone used by ancient navigators to guide us into the potential of our life. So in 1967, Sangharakshitas, trusting his heart's knowing, set up small classes in a basement in central London. And out of that visionary step, a whole new Buddhist movement was established. And 53 years later, his vision continues to flourish as it sustains and inspires a large and growing community, which is reaching right across the world. And what we are benefiting, all of us here are benefiting from, is the passing on of the vision of the Dharma, from visionary to visionary, heart to heart, leading back through time to the moment over 2,500 years ago now, when the Buddha responded to the famous vision of a lotus pool. This vision that inspired him to walk from place to place in northern India, sharing the Dharma to alleviate and ultimately bring to an end suffering in its infinite forms. So just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that Sangharakshitas is the Buddha, but that his vision continues a lineage of transmission that reaches back through history all the way back to the vision of the lotus pool. Now this year in the centre, we are exploring the Noble Eightfold Path. And as you know, this path can be divided into the path of vision and the path of transformation. So tonight, one way of describing what I'm going to be talking about is Sangharakshitas' vision and the path of transformation that he articulated, shared and practiced to create the conditions that invited us and so many others onto the path of the Dharma life, with his heart wish to serve the Dharma, to bring an end to suffering. So I'm aware for all of us, passively sitting in front of a monitor can be quite tiring. So I'm going to try to condense Sangharakshitas' vision of the path into a 30-minute talk. So having started to try to write this, I realized that this was somewhat ambitious. So I've decided to focus on one key element of Sangharakshitas' vision. And this element he recognized as the central or the principal act of a Buddhist. The principal act of a Buddhist is to go for refuge to the three jewels. So this is why we've just chanted the refuges and precepts. We're emphasizing the centrality of going for refuge to the three jewels as the recognition that this is the primary path of transformation. And this emphasis on going for refuge to the three jewels is one of the key defining aspects of the Triratna community that Sangharakshitas has established. So what are these three jewels that we go to refuge to? And how do they inform the path that gives us the ability to transform our lives? So the path of transformation uses the exemplar of the Buddha to help us align our actions and our ethical behavior and our responsiveness by direct knowing of knowing what it is to be fully, truly human, as exemplified by this extraordinary being, this extraordinary life of the Buddha. So this is the Buddha Jewel. We go for refuge to the Buddha Jewel. And then there's a path of transformation of our knowledge, and the direct experience of that is developed by helping us to see through the views, the narratives and the images that limit our perception. And this is done by testing our experience in the clear light of the Dharma. This is what transforms our life. This is the Dharma Jewel. We go for refuge to the jewel of the Dharma. And the path of our relational life unfolds as we discover more and more how utterly interwoven and interdependent our lives are. And probably this is very much to the fore at this time. And the Sangha Jewel encourages us to bring our unique life experience into the communal dance that supports, challenges and inspires us all to become wholeheartedly creative and responsive in the company of others. The Sangha Jewel reveals our universal longing for meaning, for value, and for community, or the sense of finding our tribe. So I hope we've all had these glimpses of the Dharma embodied through our interactions with each other. This is what creates Sangha, and particularly Kalyana Mitrata, or spiritual friendship, the sharing of our love of the Dharma. So this is the Sangha Jewel, and we go for refuge to the Sangha Jewel. So, as I've already said, to try to talk about Sangharakshitas' vision just in 30 minutes is actually really difficult. And even to talk about all three aspects of the three jewels, going for refuge to the three jewels in 30 minutes, that too is difficult. So I'm actually going to reduce my focus down even further now, simply to talk about the jewel of Sangha. Whilst doing that, just to recall that each jewel, of course, reflects the other. So tonight, as an act of celebration of Sangharakshitas' vision, I'm going to be saying something about going for refuge to the Sangha Jewel. So to set out on this celebration, I'll just remind you that going for refuge to the three jewels is a means to end suffering. That's the sole reason that they are seen as refuges. They are a refuge because they guide our lives towards a safe haven, a harbour, a cool cave, an island amongst the floods. They guide us towards the place of bliss, the home of ease, the further shore, the holy city. They are the ineffable medicine of all the Buddhas. So I'm using these similes to remind us that the language of the Dharma is always poetic, in the sense that it's always pointing beyond itself. Going for refuge is always a movement away from rigidity to a greater responsive fluidity. It's always a movement away beyond the fixed self-created boundaries of identity and views that we thought would keep us safe and yet may have become our prisons. So going for refuge is a statement of intent. It's a quest for freedom. So how does going for refuge to the Sangha Jewel support that transformation from suffering to liberation? The Sangharakshita talks about this as about insight being flashes of lightning in darkness that reveal momentarily how things really are. Clear seeing momentarily frees us from delusion. And these flashes of insight are the direct means to end suffering. And the path of transformation is making full use of these momentary glimpses. So one way we can talk about the Sangha Jewel is that it's the means to create conditions that are most likely to attract the lightning to strike, to bring this momentary clarity and direct knowing of how things really are. The Sangha Jewel is the means to create the best conditions for momentary clear seeing. The Sangha Jewel is like the lightning conductor, earthing reality through our relational life. And I'd just like to suggest that at this time, the potential for lightning seems to be really heightened. We've been removed from our routines and our habits, and we've been swept into very much unknown territory. So we're probably more alert, probably more reflective than we often are. So we could see this time as full of potential for personal and social transformation through insight and a revisioning of our lives. Sangharakshita was very clear about the need to create supportive conditions for insight in the early days of Triratna. And he encouraged the Sangha to participate in what used to be called the 3 C's: centres, communities and cooperatives. And this was in the days when many in the wider society were questioning the norms established in post-war Britain. We were looking for new ways to live and work, new ways to live together, new ways to find meaning in a post-war, post-Christian society. Now, I'm realizing that for some of you this may sound rather remote. It's like a history lesson maybe, particularly as we live now in such a different time. And maybe right now, within this, because of this pandemic, we're living on the edge of a post-individualistic, a post-materialistic society. However, it may be, I think the point I'm trying to make is that wanting to celebrate Sangharakshita's emphasis on establishing conditions that are conducive to insight. He saw quite clearly the need for a holistic vision of practice that extended far beyond simply meditating regularly or studying the Dharma. Sangharakshita invited us to look at the totality of our life, to look deeply into what we are actually going for refuge to. He recognized that insight arises through working creatively to establish conditions in which the lightning flash of insight is most likely to strike. And right now, it seems we have this rare opportunity to dream of a new world, a new way of being that is in accord with our vision and with Sangharakshita's vision. In a lecture called The Individual, the Group and the Community, and actually in many other places too, Sangharakshita lays out this vision of creating a supportive spiritual community or Sangha. And in this particular lecture, he suggests that we have to see through and release ourselves from the limitations of group or social pressure, the pressure to conform and maintain the old order. And he suggests that this is where we all begin on the path of transformation. We begin in this territory of views, habits, social interactions, which are primarily conditioned by our family, society, these arenas which we've been born into. So in the early stages of this transformational path, we may be actually blind to how habit creates our perception of the world. Unless we find the means to lean into the Dharma, into meditation and spiritual friendship, we may find ourselves continually being overwhelmed by social and family conditioning, where our internal relationships can often feel chaotic, fear-filled, or driven by the need for safety and protection. But in terms of the path of vision and transformation, one of the first things that we have to do, we're invited to do, is to establish sufficient internal space through meditation and through reflection to recognize a clear distinction or a separation between our habits of perception and our own direct embodied experience of our own life and the lives of those around us. It's through this sense of embodied experience that we can begin to discover our particular and precious heart's wish. So Sangharakshita describes this as the emergent individual who's building a sense of separation and differentiation between themselves and those around them, based on a developing vision of who they are and the direction they wish to take in their life. And the individual, the emerging individual, establishes a sense of, or the capacity to reflect, to sift experience, and listen to the heart. Through this helps us to establish a strong sense of healthy selfhood, which we need to establish. This helps us to be in awareness and communicate from this, our individual experience. So we, through this healthy sense of selfhood, we establish the capacity to be with difference and correspondence without either merging or splitting from the other. We establish the capacity to see and be seen. And this is the basis of human communication and of Sangha. The Sangharakshita points to something precious that can then emerge when when we are really able to trust our individuality, when we can really meet as individuals, not threatened by difference, by comparison, when we have confidence in our own embodied experience. Sangharakshita describes that when we meet under these conditions, when we have this confidence, then there is a possibility of what he describes as the higher third arising amongst us. When individuals are engaged in life, working with other individuals for a greater purpose, meditating together, working together, studying together, when we are utterly absorbed and engaged, there may at times be glimpses of something which appears to be utterly other that seems to appear between and amongst us. Now, Sangharakshita talked about this very movingly when he talked about his time in working with the ex-untouchables in India at a particular phase in Indian history. And he felt during that period that he was simply serving or even channeling something which was more than himself. And he used the term sobernost to describe this particular sense of participation and service. I think my own term would probably be grace. But it's something that seems to arise out of a much greater space, that seems to arise between and amongst, rather than being the property or the character of any particular individual within the situation. By giving this description of sobernost or grace, this third order of consciousness, as it's sometimes described, in talking this way, it's possible to see why Bhante's vision came developed into the sense of Sangha being a single body. And he uses the image of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who's acting for the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. And the image has this wondrous array of 1,000 hands reaching out to the world from a single heart. And for me, this is the image of Sangha, being as one body, which suggests something boundless, something fluid, something that's always present, to which we contribute our sensibility and our awareness. So this is the vision of the individual being supported by and in service to this vast interactive field of awareness, momentary glimpsed through moments of grace. So I find the image of Avalokiteshvara particularly beautiful, because it suggests that by bringing our unique individuality into relation with others through Sangha, we're actually serving the spiritual potential that is attempting to manifest through, amongst and between us. And for me, this is the real pinnacle of Sangharakshitas' vision of Sangha, being in service to the arising of the heart wish, the end of suffering, through liberation, not through or for any particular individual, but for all beings in this living field. A Sangha without boundaries, working for the welfare of all life. So I'm going to end now just by changing direction to try to talk to you directly about your reflective practice. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions which I hope will draw together why going for refuge to the Sangha Jewel is so central to Sangharakshita's vision, and why the path of transformation that is offered is so worthy of this celebration. So there's a series of questions for you. So the first thing I mentioned was Sangharakshita's heart wish to create conditions for the lightning strike of insight to arise amongst us. Faith in Buddhism is established by testing something in our own experience, testing in the article of faith. So the question is, do we trust the lightning? Do we trust that which the lightning illuminates? I think this is vital, because what's hidden to ourselves or others cannot be transformed, so it needs to be brought into the light. Another way of describing it is what is kept out of awareness may be the very thing that we and others need to help us mature and grow collectively. So there's various ways of looking at this, these flashes of insight, these lightning strikes. So the first question is, do you have faith in your own capacity for insight? Do you have faith in your own capacity for insight? So I've mentioned these momentary flashes of insight. So the associated question refers to the fleeting nature of insight. So can we acknowledge that for most of us, insight is only a glimpse of clear seeing through this flash of lightning? Can we have faith to acknowledge the fleeting nature of insight without undermining or undervaluing its precious nature? Can we recognize these lightning flashes as a fragment of seeing which can release us from limited views, open up new knowing, to recognize that we don't need or have the whole picture, but we may discover the next step, the next release, the next response. And this is so often revealed, or at least activated, simply by attending to what's right here, between and amongst us. So my next question to you is, do you have faith to contribute your insights with a light touch for the benefit of our unfolding Sangha? Do you trust, do you have faith to contribute your insights with a light touch for the benefit of our unfolding Sangha? And then next I talked about Sangharakshitas' vision, this vision that something is trying to manifest through our shared lives. So can we check, is this something that we know? It may be that we had an experience when we were with others, or maybe even a time when we were alone in nature. So the next question is, do you have faith that something is trying to become visible in the world, which is trying to manifest amongst and through us? Do you have faith that something is trying to become visible in the world, which is trying to manifest amongst and through us? And then finally, just want to say, talk about generosity. So generosity is the most profound tool for cultivating a sense of the communal body of Sangha. Generosity challenges a self-orientated life and encourages us to participate in a shared life, promoting a sense of abundance rather than a fear of lack. So do you have faith in generosity and practice it in its many forms? Do you have faith in generosity and practice it in all its many forms? So I think and hope that by reflecting on these questions, we will be honouring Sangharakshitas' vision of Sangha and actively celebrating the path of transformation that he laid out so clearly for our welfare 53 years ago this month. Thank you.